Gentleman from 14.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the roll call used for the suspension of rules on House Bill 608 now be used for the suspension of rules on Senate Bill 1389, making possible the immediate consideration of Senate Bill 1389.
You've heard the unanimous consent request. Is there an objection? Hearing none, the roll call of 56 aye, 12 nay, and 2 absent used for the suspension of rules on House Bill 608 will now be used for the suspension of rules on Senate Bill 1389, making possible the immediate consideration of Senate Bill 1389. Gentleman from District 32.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that we dispense with further reading of Senate Bill 1389.
You've heard the request. Is there an objection? Hearing none, the gentleman has the floor to open the debate.
Mr. Speaker, there's a saying that I remember years ago that throughout his radio career, a very famous radio broadcaster said continually, with freedom comes responsibility. And with that note, previous to discussing Senate Bill 1389, I think it's important that the topic of this piece of legislation does extend and put into code our determination to follow the Second Amendment of our Constitution, and does provide an additional element of freedom, if you will, with regard to being able to carry a concealed weapon without a license. Mr. Speaker, this bill is written quite simply and is very direct and to the point, and just take you through just a couple of those provisions. One of the things that we did last year, I believe, was to put into law that no one outside of city limits could, between the ages of 18 and 21, could carry a permit or carry a weapon. Or they were not, let me put it this way, they were not eligible to have a concealed weapons permit. And so we make sure that we include that as the ability if someone can do that, can carry even with 18 years of age, but they need to go through the procedure to get an enhanced permit. So that makes it possible for that to occur. Also, they can carry without a permit if they are qualified under Section 11, which we'll talk about in a second. A concealed handgun can then be carried by a person who is 21 years of age. This is without a permit. Is a resident of Idaho and is not disqualified from being issued a license under subsection 11. So there are disqualifiers that we mention in section 11, and those are pretty apparent. Mr. Speaker, we also put into code here on page 5 some more things that would disqualify someone from carrying without a license, and you can read those on lines 4 through 10. And those basically are those who are punishable by imprisonment for a term exceeding a year, unless that person was has successfully completed probation or received probation after having adjudicated guilty and received without judgment for a misdemeanor offense that has an element, the intentional use, attempted use, or threatened use of physical force against the person or property of another, unless the person has successfully completed probation. So those are some additional requirements that will be put in place and prohibitions to someone carrying concealed without a permit. I think that probably the next thing that's we need to talk about here is that age group between 18 and 21 will have the ability, if they desire, to get a concealed weapons permit. And since they've already gone through that extra training, the sheriff of a county shall issue that license, except for the age requirement contained in what we've just described. And then, but they otherwise have to meet the tests in getting a concealed weapon permit. And then, after July of this year, a license issued pursuant to this section shall expire on the 21st birthday of the licensee, and then that licensee then can go and get their concealed weapons permit. And it would be a concealed weapons permit because they've already completed the requirements for that. Now this permit will be a distinguishable one and readily identified. Mr. Speaker, that in essence are the main provisions of this. I'm sure there are questions from others here about what the bill contains, but Mr. Speaker, this is a good piece of legislation. It does allow those who meet the essential requirements of this legislation to be able to carry a concealed weapon without a license. And Mr. Speaker, debate is open.